Well, we're slowly making our way through Ezekiel. We are now in chapter 12. And hopefully we'll get through chapter 15. That's the goal. 15 is pretty short, so we should be able to slap that on at the end. Before we hop in, though, we need to do a little bit of context. But I don't want to spend too much time on that, so can someone just kind of start us off? And we can kind of just bounce off each other, but just do a quick recap of the book as a whole, and then maybe just a little bit more on what we covered last week.
Yeah, so Ezekiel is he's from the priestly line, presumably the priestly line of Levi. He's about 30 years old whenever the book kicks off, but he is not living in the land of Israel. He was part of that first wave of people who got sent off to Babylon, and so he kind of went off with Daniel and them, but he's a little bit older than Daniel at this time period, and he's writing from Babylon, but pretty much everything he's prophesying about is about Jerusalem, right? So that kind of sets him apart from Daniel, right? Daniel is in Babylon, but he's prophesying to the Jews in Babylon, whereas Ezekiel has a message. He has a message for the people in Babylon, but it's about what's going down in Jerusalem. And so pretty much the first 11 chapters of the book are really building up to this final climactic moment that we saw last week, where God's presence departs from the temple. And so I'm not, without summarizing really everything else before that, what we saw last week was basically Ezekiel was transported to Jerusalem. It says that he was in the spirit and God just brought him there. And he sees all this idolatrous stuff going on. And then basically God shows up in that same chariot vision that we saw at the very beginning of Ezekiel. But this time, God is mounting his chariot to leave the Holy of Holies, right? And so you see like this gradual departure where he exits the temple building, he exits the temple court, he goes to the gate of the city, he goes down through the Mount of Olives, and then he kind of just pauses one moment, and then he just leaves. And it's a pretty heartbreaking moment whenever you consider the fact that the reason the people of Israel exist is to dwell with God. And it's not that he's abandoning them, because the whole thing is that he's actually going with them into captivity, right? So he's just going into exile along with them. But the sad part is that he is abandoning the place where he had caused his name to dwell. And that was basically the sign that they were there to stay. Basically, he came to dwell in the temple during the reign of Solomon, which is it's supposed to represent finality and just sturdiness, but he's gone now. And so that's kind of where we left off last week.
Yeah, and as you mentioned how he's a priest, presumably a Levite priest, I do think it's interesting when you also consider that a lot of the language we've seen throughout has been, there's been a much bigger focus on the temple and different Levitical imagery than probably any other book we've really gone through so far. One thing that we saw throughout this whole vision in Jerusalem was that a lot of the imagery had to do with all this atonement imagery. And this kind of goes alongside the whole thing where God says that he is spending his wrath. This is something that we read about in Deuteronomy and Jeremiah, but God, when he is going to destroy Jerusalem, he is spending his wrath on them. And so it's not just destruction, but it's his wrath as judgment for their sins. And so a lot of the imagery in here has been about the atonement, to where the destruction won't be the end. He will have the people he will spare, but he essentially is going to destroy and rebuild Jerusalem from the ground up. So there is this atonement imagery going on.
Yeah, and on that same note, we hadn't really talked about this in the past, but you saying that kind of made me think of it. The fact that he is from the priestly line could almost help explain some of the weird imagery that we see, because whenever you read Ezekiel, especially these earlier chapters, some of it is just weird, to where you're what the heck is going on here? But if you consider the fact that he is a priest, he's probably more better educated than the typical everyday Jewish person. I mean, some of the other prophets we've looked at are just shepherds who are called to prophesy. Whereas this is a guy who has spent his life studying the scriptures, and he is going to be even more steeped in the religious worldview of that time period than anybody else. And so it makes sense, even because you're talking about how they use a lot of temple imagery and atonement imagery. Even that opening vision of God on that chariot in the clouds and stuff, that is all stuff that is ripped from the scriptures, that came before it, but it's almost you can tell that he's been meditating on it even more, to where it's all imagery that is tied to the temple or to the visions of Daniel and stuff, but you can tell it's a guy who spent a lot of time with it, right? And so I really hadn't considered that, but that actually could explain, like, for us it's really weird, but I don't know. He's just a very different author than the authors that we've seen write other books so far. So that's just something worth considering.
Yeah, I had been thinking about that. Just like even Jeremiah, like it would mention the temple here and there, but most of the book wasn't dedicated to like the temple itself. It was like, 10 chapters, and it was don't trust in the temple alone, and then other stuff would move on. But like so far, pretty much everything we've been reading has been centered around the temple, whether the temple came to Ezekiel, or whether he's being like taken in a vision to the temple.
Yeah,
it's all being centered around that, and like like he goes into more detail about like the different cult practices, to where like Jeremiah didn't really go through that. It was more so just we knew that there were like idolatry was going on, and we knew that like idol worship and all these other things were going on, but like we're seeing more of it in detail.
Yeah.
And so that would make sense. That being said, is there anything else I want to add before we just go ahead and hop on in? So we ended up last
with the whole atonement imagery. I think it's important that we talk about Ezekiel's role as like a watchman that God like basically designates him with, where he's essentially supposed to, see the danger that's coming and then communicate that to the people. And as long as he does that, his sort of like the iniquity of the people will fall on him. But if he fails in that role to sort of tell the people what's coming, then the blood of the people is essentially on his hands.
Yeah, it's like vengeance isn't in his hands, but he leaves it up to God. But it's his role to communicate that to people.
And that's another reason why his book is filled with like, there's more asked of Ezekiel than any other prophet. To where we haven't even begun to scratch the surface. We've seen some of it to where he's having to make like these elaborate dioramas, like carving stuff in bricks, and he's eating bread that's like cooked over poop. Like it's really weird stuff. But it's performative, but it's because his singular job is to make the people aware of how dire the situation is. And so he's basically just being instructed by God to take every single possible avenue to communicate it to them so that they have no excuse whenever things go down.
It's like every action he takes is another representation of the siege that's about to fall on the people.
Yeah, and so there's like this desperation to it, and also it explains why he's not having the greatest time. So.
And as we're going to read in these sections, and probably as well in the past chapters, we're going to see words popping up like how he is doing this as like a wonder or a sign to the people. The same word is the word used back in Exodus, to where whenever Moses is performing these signs before Pharaoh to show like this is Yahweh, that's the same thing's going on. Like the serpent and the staff, the same word is that for like whenever we read, the first thing we're gonna read about is this where Ezekiel's gonna have to like play out this exile. He's doing that as a sign to the people, and so there's like kind of a thing going on there where, and then we'll also see a phrase repeated throughout this, which is that they may know that I am Yahweh. That's the same thing we read about in the Exodus story, to where God is showing the people who He is. He's having to almost reintroduce Himself.
The difference is that instead of judging Egypt, He's now judging His own people.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a
instead of bringing them into the land, He's kicking them out of the land.
Yeah.
And so it's
in a way, it is also kind of miraculous that Ezekiel is able to do all these things and endure the stuff that the tribulations that God gives him, and his body doesn't just completely fall apart.
That's
like
true.
He's literally forced to lay on one side of his body and eat bread made of beans and seeds and not stuff you usually make bread with, that is cooked over cow dung, and that's the only thing that can sustain him. And it's not even like he's given a large amount of that to eat. He's given the amount that would be like ration to the people in siege times.
But it makes sense though, because if there's one person who really needs to understand what's at stake, it's him.
Yes.
Because he's the one that God's been saying, like, listen, you've got to do this. Like, you have to go and warn the people, and it's a big job. But he needs to understand what's at stake for him to be able to carry this out.
Well, and also just I know we need to get into the text itself, but just to tie into the Exodus imagery of it all, it does make Ezekiel like a new Moses, because Moses was also a Levite, and Moses also was miraculously preserved by God through Moses, he's being like fasting for 40 days, 40 nights up on top of the mountain, but being preserved by God. And even like we talked about this because we're in Exodus right now on the podcast.
Yeah.
Moses basically has to go through his own Israel arc before he can deliver Israel, to where Moses, like Israel, he has Pharaoh trying to kill him. He is delivered through water. He flees into the desert. He meets God at the mountain, to where it's like he has to go through everything Israel goes through before Israel can go through it. And so it's like Ezekiel's basically doing the exact same thing. And so you do have that connection to where he is basically just another Moses.
Yeah, that's a good connection there. One last thing I'll say before we go through. I think you'll see in this section in particular, we've been seeing this throughout, but there's going to be a big focus on like leadership. And so a lot of the things that God's saying here, it's not just directed towards them, but you'll notice that a lot of the things he has to say here, they're directed towards leadership. So prophets, priests, the nobility, all those people. And in the same way that Ezekiel is being kind of responsible for the people at large, God is holding these people accountable for the people that they're responsible for in Jerusalem. So just keep that in mind as we go through, because that will be a big part of the text. Is there anything else y'all wanted to add before we hop in?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So we're starting in chapter 12. Then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, you live in the midst of the rebellious house, who have eyes to see but do not see, ears to hear but do not hear, for they are a rebellious house. Now as for you, son of man, prepare for yourself baggage for exile, and go into exile by day in their sight. Even go into exile from your place to another place in their sight. Perhaps they will see, though they are a rebellious house. Bring your baggage out by day in their sight, as baggage for exile. Then you will go out at evening in their sight, as those going into exile. In their sight, dig a hole through the wall, and go out through it. In their sight, carry the baggage on your shoulder, and bring it out in the dark. You shall cover your face, so that you cannot see the land, for I set you as a wondrous sign to the house of Israel. I did so, as I had been commanded. By day I brought out my baggage like the baggage of an exile. Then in the evening I dug through the wall with my hands. I went out in the dark, and carried the baggage on my shoulder in their sights. And in the morning the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, has not the house of Israel, the rebellious house, said to you, What are you doing? Say to them, Thus says Lord Yahweh, this oracle concerns the prince in Jerusalem, as well as all the house of Israel who are in it. Say, I am a wondrous sign to you. As I have done, so it will be done to them. They will go into exile, into captivity. The prince who is among them will carry his baggage on his shoulder in the dark and go out. They will dig a hole through the wall to bring it out. He will cover his face so that he cannot see the land with his eyes. I will also spread my net over him, and he will be caught in my snare. And I will bring him to Babylon, in the land of the Chaldeans. Yet he will not see it, though he will die there. And I will scatter to every wind all who are around him, his helpers and all his troops. And I will draw out a sword after them. So they will know that I am Yahweh, when I scatter them among the nations, and spread them among the countries. But I will spare a few of them from sword, famine, and pestilence, that they may recount all their abominations among the nations where they go, and may know that I am Yahweh. We'll stop there. So what happens there?
Ezekiel is given another task to perform in front of the people. This one literally simulating their exile from Israel, from the land of Israel into Babylon.
Yeah, so Ezekiel's where again?
He's in Babylon at the time.
So he's already in exile.
Yes.
And he's doing this to the exiles.
Yes.
So the question is, like, what is it actually? What is he saying?
That's
why would he be telling the exiles that they're going into exile if they already went into exile? It's not a trick question, by the way. I'm just asking. It's kind of twofold.
Yeah.
Is he talking about them, or is he talking about the other people still in Jerusalem?
I think it's both.
Okay.
I think if you consider what we've been talking about, kind of the question that's kind of been like, it's kind of a twofold thing. So for one, the people in exile already might be like, they might believe that they're going to come back to the land soon, so they're going to get saved and come back.
Yeah.
Whereas the people in Jerusalem are thinking that they're not going to go into exile.
Yeah.
So even though these people are currently in exile, so it's kind of like, what the heck, man? I think what he's really saying is, y'all aren't going to come back to the land soon, and those people are going to join us. So rather than us going back to the land, they're going to come back here with us too.
And I think it almost like, I don't quite want to go too deep with it, but it could also tie into like what Daniel's message was in the latter half of his book, where it's like, just because you're back in the land of Israel does not mean your exile has ended. It's like you still have a spiritual exile that you are under that will last for hundreds of years after you return to the land.
Well, I do think there's definitely the idea of like things aren't gonna like they're not gonna be over soon. For sure.
Yeah, at the very least, he's just communicating this is not going to be a there and back quick journey. Well, and the thing that confused me is specifically because it said, where it said like this is directed towards the prince.
Yeah, it's talking.
Yeah.
Which I found that interesting too, because there's obviously a story about one of the rulers of Judah who was like blinded and taken into captivity in Babylon, and like, but he doesn't actually die in Babylon, so I'm not sure if that's what this is referring to, or if it's referring to something else.
Well, that's what I was trying to remember, because I'm pretty sure he was taken during the first exile, right?
And they're like from this.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure
Or
I
Jeconiah.
think this is referring to Zedekiah.
Yeah, but
Okay,
see, Zedekiah does get blinded and taken out, but he never reaches the land of Babylon because he has his entire family killed in front of him, and then he dies.
Does he die?
Yeah, that's at the end of 2 Kings.
I'll go look it up.
Okay.
But that was the one part that was confusing me, just because
Because I was thinking that during that passage, either in Jeremiah, somewhere it talks about how he's like gonna go to the land, but he won't see it. Like he'll die in a land he doesn't see.
yeah. Like I don't think he was. I didn't remember him being killed, because I thought the whole thing was that he was blinded and then there. But
yeah.
I thought that was Jeconiah.
I don't know. I get them all mixed up. The king of Babylon made his uncle Madaniah king in his place, changed his name to Zedekiah. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king. He reigned 11 years. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah. He did what was evil inside the Lord. Through the anger of Yahweh, Zedekiah is the one who rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar.
Was he the first one?
He was blinded. He blinded the eyes of Zedekiah and bound him with bronze fetters and brought him to Babylon.
Okay.
So it doesn't say anything about him dying.
Gotcha. So whoever the last king was the one who was killed.
So would that? But the whole reason I brought that up is just because with Zedekiah that would have taken place at a later. Because remember, there's like the 3 waves of exile, right? The first wave was primarily with nobility, and then Zedekiah, I'm assuming, is that second wave. That's the main reason I was getting confused, just because if Ezekiel's already in Babylon, whenever it mentioned there being a prince, I was like, but wait, all the princes would have already been there. But if it's talking about Zedekiah,
That's true.
Yeah.
that makes things make sense in my head. I was just trying to wrap my mind around it.
Yeah, Jeremiah 52. Then the king of Babylon slaughtered the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, and he also slaughtered all the princes of Judah and Riblah. Then he blinded the eyes of Zedekiah, and the king of Babylon bound him with bronze fetters and brought him to Babylon and put him in prison until the day of his death. So, yeah. So I'm pretty sure this is referring to Zedekiah, because he's also the guy, I believe, that tried to flee in the nighttime.
Okay.
And he was overtaken.
Yeah. So basically, Ezekiel saying, we're not going back to Zedekiah. Zedekiah's coming to us.
Yeah.
You'll see him, and he won't see you, because he's going to be blind. Yeah. So what do you think is like? What is the point of him communicating this message to them?
Well, I would say probably a big message here. Again, I think, like I said, there's kind of this two-way thing going on to where I think the people in exile still believe they're going to come back soon, as well as the people in Jerusalem think that they're not going to go into exile. And so I think the main thing here is making sure that they realize that they're not going to come back anytime soon. Because really throughout this and Jeremiah, a big thing has always been like, don't fight back, just surrender, submit to Babylon, and just, you already have your 7 years appointed for you, and so you need to just like submit to where it's not necessarily super explicit here, but I think implicitly the people like would still be tempted to not submit, and so I think that there is still this message of like, we need to go ahead and settle and submit to Babylon.
Yeah.
What else do y'all think?
So, I guess the main thing, just given like where he's going to head with this in the next few chapters. That's what I was more trying to think of, because Jeremiah is very much, whenever we look at his book, he is very much explicitly preaching, submit to Babylon, don't fight back, submit to Babylon. Mm-hmm. Whereas it seems like if you look at like the next few chapters, Ezekiel is going to go on like a rant against the leaders. Mm-hmm. And so I would almost argue that like, specifically because this thing, while it does represent all the people as a whole going into exile, he specifically says this oracle is about the prince. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the idea that God is looking at the leaders and holding them accountable. And he will hold you accountable for what you've done, and you're not going to get away with it. Mm-hmm. And if that is true for the people in Jerusalem, how much more is it true even for the people in Babylon? And so then, it's almost like he's setting this up to be like, God cares about leadership. And it was bad leadership that resulted in y'all being in Babylon. And so, if you want to go back anytime, you need to get your act together. And so he's going to turn against like the false prophets and the idolaters and say like, stop. Because it's not like God's just like it still ties into the same message, right? Like, we're not going back anytime soon, but God might just leave us here if we don't repent. Mm-hmm. Like, we need to like get your act together and stop leading people astray. If that kind of makes sense. Like,
yeah, it makes sense that here he's kind of starting with the king.
Yeah.
And he's going to move on to the other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that the verse where it says, what does it say? The prince who is among them will carry his baggage on his shoulder in the dark and go out. Like, there is kind of this imagery of like, this prince who was so high up is now being humbled down to like everybody else. Where in the end, he's basically being judged like he's anybody else, to where he's not having people who's carrying his own baggage for him. He's not, having this parade where he's leaving. He's hiding in cover of night, and he's having to carry his own baggage. To where, like, another thing that I think is going on here is basically like the proud will be, the proud will be humbled and the humble will be exalted. To where, like you said, he's going to keep these people accountable, but he's going to judge them. Like, in the end, they're just another person like anybody else.
Yeah. Quick question. Not to linger on this too much, but what's the deal with him having to cut the whole wall? Mm-hmm. Like, specifically because like it says like basically chisel a hole in the wall, and I'm assuming he's just doing this to some random wall in Babylon, and it seems to represent the walls in Jerusalem. But he also did a similar thing in the previous chapters, right? Because whenever he was in the temple, if you remember, there was a hole in the wall, and he chiseled through the hole in order to like see the idolatrous priests in like the side chambers. Mm-hmm. And so I was just wondering like, what the heck is up? Like, there's a recurring theme here of like chiseling a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that.
Well, I'm pretty sure that during the siege of Jerusalem, the leaders attempted to leave, like sneak out of the city while it was under siege, and like tried to flee a different way, but they were caught and brought back to face their judgment. So that might be what it was symbolizing. Like,
well, I think that's what it represents here. I'm just asking, like, what's the deal with the theme? Because like, I think right here it is saying like, yeah, they're going to try to escape covertly, but they're going to get caught. But I'm just saying, like, it's just weird that you have two different like stories back to back, where Ezekiel is digging a hole in a wall.
Yeah. What was the previous?
The previous one, I think, is in chapter 8. We didn't cover it last week. We covered it the week before. It was.
There we go. Verse 7, 8.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. Then he brought me to the entrance of the court, and when I looked, a hole in the wall. He said to me, "Son of man, now dig through the wall." So I dug through the wall, and behold, an entrance. And he said to me, "Go in and see the evil abominations that they are doing here."
Yeah.
So I entered and looked, and behold, every form of creeping things and beasts and detestable things with the idols of the house of Israel, were carved on the wall all around.
Yeah, I do think, like this is something that again we talked a lot about in Genesis, but like this whole like theme of seeing and hearing is popping up again in this book. If you read to verse 12, I think this kind of gives insight on that, to where he says, "Son of man, do you see what the elders of the house of Israel are doing in the dark, each man in the room of his carved images? For they say, Yahweh does not see us. Yahweh has forsaken the land." And the whole thing is that, I mean, God has kind of forsaken the land in a sense, but he still sees them. To where, like, this whole thing is like, these people have eyes but don't see, have ears but don't hear, but God sees all. And so, like, in this case, he has even brought Ezekiel, like, to the land, so they're seeing things that the people don't realize that they're seeing them. And so I think there's this, like, idea of, like, sneaking around, like, they're trying, like, the people, like Zedekiah or whoever who are trying to escape the city, they're trying to escape God's judgment so that God doesn't see them leave, but God sees them. And so he already has a snare for them set.
Okay.
These people are worshiping in secret, but doesn't realize that God sees them the whole time.
Yeah, so there's like a contrast where in both stories they're being sneaky, but in both stories God is demonstrating his power and their weakness.
Mm-hmm.
To where in one, they're using a wall as like a protective barrier against the eyes of God, but God's like, I can see through the wall.
Yeah.
And so they're being stupid, he's more powerful.
Yeah.
And then in this other story, they're like, ooh, we're going to dig through the wall in order to escape. And God's like, I'm going to set a trap for you outside the walls.
Yeah.
And
if we, like, this is kind of spooling a bit, but as we read, there's going to be a couple other things we're going to read in this section, to where there's this, like, plastering the walls. And then later on, he says, like, when he meets up with the elders, God tells Ezekiel, hey, these guys have idols in their hearts. The idea is there's, like, these people are, these leaders, it's not even that they don't necessarily know what's coming, but it seems like they're trying to put up these walls to where God doesn't see what they're doing in hopes that they don't get the punishment they know that they're gonna, like, would be heading for them. And so the whole thing is that they're putting up these walls to where they're worshiping in secret. They don't think God's there. They're in the dark. They're trying to escape the city in the dark. They have the idols. They may not be right in front of them, but they're in their hearts.
Yeah.
They're trying to plaster the walls. We'll talk more about that when we get there, but they're trying to kind of cover up. And the whole thing is that God says, I'm going to tear everything down, and we're going to lay everything bare, and everything will be like, I see everything.
Okay. Sorry, I keep wanting to laugh. Anytime I just hear like a conversation that's like about like walls, I just think of like Trump being like, it's going to be a huge wall. It's going to be the biggest wall in the world. We're going to hide our idolatry. It's going to be great. And it's just like...
That's great.
Not
great. But
I was trying not to think about it, but it's like, I just like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's... And even when you get into like the whole like harlotry stuff, it's the same thing. Like God says he's going to like reveal their disease. It's this idea of trying to conceal what they know is there. But God sees everything. He sees to the heart.
Yeah. Well, and that ties into the whole promise throughout the whole book that he's going to take their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. So it's like they've literally encased their heart with a wall almost. And he's like, I'm going to break through it and fix that.
Exactly.
The issue is that if you're breaking through a wall of stone around a heart, you're probably going to have to kill the heart in the process. He's like, I'll just give you a new heart.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So what else? Okay, so he has this whole thing he plays out where he goes into this like metaphorical exile, and this is supposed to be concerning the Prince of Jerusalem and the people around him. So again, what does he actually say is going to happen to the prince and these people in the back half of that section?
They're going to be taken.
Well, it seems like they're trying to escape, but they're going to get caught, and several of them are going to be killed, but a lot of them are going to be taken into captivity, and they're going to be humiliated in the process and be forced to carry their own baggage, and they're not going to have servants to help them out.
Yeah, and then he spares a few of them, but he says it's for the purpose of telling other people about what happened.
Yeah.
So that they can basically tell the Gentiles what God's doing.
Yeah.
We gotta remember that the remnant of Judah and Israel isn't just like it is a means for God to continue to fulfill his promises, but it's also an example to other nations of just what God is capable of. Like the power that he has over the people that, he's supposed to be protecting, is that he can essentially dwindle them down to mere thousands, but still preserve them. And, it kind of sets an example to, like, if I'm willing to do these to my people, think of what I will do to you if you continue, sinning in your ways.
Yeah, and remember this, again, all goes back to their original covenant, which is, like, whether God blesses them or curses them, both are going to attest to his glory to the nations around them, to where if he blesses them, the nations will see and be like, wow, this is Yahweh. If God curses them and exiles them, they'll say, wow, that's Yahweh. And so...
what do we need to do to help your plan be accomplished? Oh, my plan's going to be accomplished either way. It just depends if you want to do it the easy way or the hard way. It's like I'm either going to use you or I'm going to use you. But,
And I guess in the mind of the Jewish people, the hard way was following God's commandments.
Yeah.
Not actually being punished for them. Oops.
Yeah. Is there anything else that sticks out to y'all in this section? Anything I wanted to bring up or talk about?
I think we can probably move on.
I think so too. Okay, I'll read through the rest of this chapter. Moreover, the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, you shall eat your bread with trembling and drink your water with quivering and anxiety. Then you will say to the people of the land, Thus says Lord Yahweh, concerning the inhabitants of Jerusalem and the land of Israel. They will eat their bread with anxiety, and drink their water with desolation, because their very soil will be made desolate of its fullness on account of the violence of all who inhabit it. The inhabited cities will be laid waste, and the land will be a desolation. So you will know that I am Yahweh. Then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, what is this proverb you people have concerning the land of Israel, saying, The days are long, and every vision fails? Therefore say to them, Thus says Lord Yahweh, I will make this proverb cease, so that they will no longer use it as a proverb in Israel. But speak to them, the days draw near, as well as the fulfillment of every vision. For there will no longer be any worthless vision or flattering divination in the midst of the house of Israel. For I, Yahweh, will speak, and whatever word I speak will be done. It will no longer be delayed, for in your days, O rebellious house, I will speak the word and do it, declares Lord Yahweh. Furthermore, the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, behold, the house of Israel is saying, the vision that he beholds is for many years from now, and he prophesies for times far off. Therefore say to them, Thus says Lord Yahweh, none of my words will be delayed any longer. Whatever word I speak will be done, declares Lord Yahweh.
Verse 25 is terrifying, given the context is that Yahweh is speaking words of their destruction.
Yeah.
And he's saying,
Yeah.
I'm not waiting. It's like, you're on the clock, pal.
Yeah. Well, I love this because, like, if you're the recipient of these words, terrible words to hear. Mm-hmm. But as somebody who's living like thousands of years later, you can't help but just kind of like laugh because, like, God is like, okay, Ezekiel, I need you to just go like clarify something to them. Whenever I told them destruction was coming, they keep saying that, oh, he keeps saying that he's not doing anything. It's not that I was lying. I was being nice. Like, I was just waiting. Like, I was hoping y'all would repent. But it's like, if y'all are gonna, like, if y'all think I can't do it, well, by all means, let me show you. Like it's just so funny. It's like, he's just like, oh, like, y'all are misunderstanding here. I was just being gracious to you. Like, it's not that I couldn't destroy you. No, yes, this has been a long time coming, but that's just because I'm slow to anger. It's not because it's not going to happen.
Yeah, what's the verse in Romans, like, don't you know that God's kindness is meant to lead you to repentance?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to remember, especially for his audience, people like ancient, Hebrew people, they have the Torah, and their God is the God that the book starts off by saying, God said, let there be light, and there was light.
Yeah.
Genesis 1 is all about God spoke, and thus there was. There was no delay.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, God, like, anything that he says is going to happen. If it hasn't happened yet, it's not because he can't. It's because he just has chosen not to.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, I was I don't know. I figured y'all didn't want to die, so I was like just giving you a chance to repent, but y'all aren't repenting, and y'all are mocking me as if it's never going to happen. It's like, okay, well, let's speed it up then. Sure. All right, well, just to prove it to you, I'm not delaying any longer. It's going to happen soon. There you go. Have fun dying. It's like again, if you're the people hearing this, you're like, oh, crud. Like, maybe we shouldn't have mocked God. But I think, like, from an applicational perspective, this is what people still do to this day.
Yeah.
Like, if you think about, I don't know, the way that we live our lives usually as if judgment were never coming for us.
Mm-hmm.
To where we're like, it's like, yeah, I'll repent tomorrow. But then, like, there's, like, this thing, like, within Christian circles, whenever we talk about the return of Christ, and we're like, he could come back at any point. But we don't live like he can come back at any point. And that's because, like, we trick ourselves into thinking that whenever Jesus returns, it's just going to be, like, happy-go-lucky and, like, people are like, oh, I can't wait till Jesus returns, so I can just give him a big old bear hug. It's like, have you read the descriptions of his return? It's not like a happy moment for everybody. And even if you say, oh, well, I'm washed in the blood of the Lamb, I'm a Christian, it's like, well, yeah, Jesus says there's a lot of people who are going to think that. And then he's going to show up to them and be like, you haven't been living for me. He's going to be like, well, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know you. Yeah. And so I think it's interesting how even to this day we do the same thing that they do. To where, like, they want to think, oh, yeah, we're God's chosen people. God loves us. He just wants to give us a big old bear hug. He's not going to judge us. No. Like, and if he is, that's a long time away. And that's the same thing we do to this day. And so it's just, it's an interesting thing. It's like, it's a human heart issue.
Yeah, well, for us, I mean, we've had 2,000 years between Jesus coming and these people that had less time than that, and they were already like this, so how much more is it like that for us?
Yeah. Well, and the worst part is that we've learned the wrong lesson in our churches, to where a lot of times we say, oh, well, that's how God treated the Jewish people, but that's because they weren't saved by Jesus. And so he's more gracious towards us. And I'm like, have you read the New Testament? Because Paul says, if God did that to the Jewish people, how much more will he do that to you? Like, the idea is like, no, with great power comes great responsibility. It's like, no, like, you've received more, and therefore you're accountable for more. Like, it's not, oh, well, now that you've received greater grace, you are less accountable. No, you've received greater grace, and therefore you're more accountable. Mm-hmm. It's not the opposite way. And so it's really weird to me how we've literally just reversed it. I don't know. That's like a big pet peeve of mine, to where it's just like snobbery, where we think, oh, like, we look down on the Jewish people and be like, oh, I can't believe they would reject Jesus, like, reject God. I'm like, we reject God all the time. Like, that's, like, you just don't want to identify as somebody who rejects God, and therefore you point fingers at them, and you're like, look at all the times they rejected God, but it's like, no, we're doing that literally every single day. Mm-hmm. And so, it's just a hard issue.
Whenever you bring that up, I like to liken it to the way the Pharisees were talking about how if they had been in their forefathers' place, they wouldn't have killed the prophets.
Yeah. And so you testify that you are descended from the people who killed the prophets.
Yeah.
Fulfill then the actions of your ancestors, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Verse 19 says, they will eat their bread with anxiety and drink their water with desolation, because their very soil will be made desolate of its fullness on account of the violence of all who inhabit it. This kind of reminds me of like how God describes the earth before the flood. How the earth was filled with violence, so the earth was ruined, made desolate because of it. Mm-hmm. And so God had to flood the whole earth and basically like start over. He had almost destroy it again to almost like start over again. Yeah. And then he rebuilt with Noah. Yeah. It's not really not too different than that. He's saying the ground has become desolate, and so he's going to have to basically destroy it and start over again.
Well, and that makes sense, because again, this is a theme throughout Scripture, is that Israel is supposed to be like a microcosm of the entire universe. Like, to where like what God is doing through Israel is going to affect the rest of the world. And so like we talked about this again in the thing that we filmed yesterday. If you look at Scripture, it's almost like a funnel shape from both directions, to where the first like 11 chapters of Genesis start with the entire world, and then it funnels down to this one nation of Israel. And then the rest of Scripture is just like this slow funneling out process where we get to see how God is using Israel to affect the rest of the nations. And so just like he judged the nations during the flood, well, now he's judging Israel. Mm-hmm. And he's going to lay it to waste, and he's going to rebuild it again. And in the same way, that's where our story is heading as well. So it's like there's like this funneling in, funneling out process again there. The language there, I've got to say, I know it's very violent and like intense, but just the imagery of like eat your bread with anxiety and trembling and stuff, it's very like cartoonish to me, like just like like just what Ezekiel is actually being asked to do. To me, it's also a very interesting thing because like it really is theatrical because he is being asked to do something with quivering and trembling and anxiety. And I suppose it's possible that Ezekiel is actually feeling that, but it doesn't say that. It's literally, he just says, go and do it in such a way. To where Ezekiel is literally functioning like an actor. To where you can imagine, like, he is totally normal, and then, as everybody's watching, he grabs bread, and he just starts shaking. To where, like, it's like he's literally putting on a show for them, and they're like, what is the point of the show? He says, let me explain. This is what the people in Jerusalem are going to be going through very soon. Like, I just find that intriguing. And it's a good contrast because later on in the book, I think it's chapter 24, he's going to be asked to do the exact opposite. To where God's going to say, hey, by the way, your wife's going to die, and you're not allowed to mourn for her. And it's like, so in this instance, he's like being asked to show very extreme emotions. Whereas in the other one, he's going to feel very extreme emotions, but he's being asked to like repress them and not feel them at all. Mm-hmm. And it's like, again, just poor Ezekiel. Like, he is just going through it all. But I just find that an interesting contrast.
Yeah, I do too. And then the next verse, the inhabited cities will be laid waste, and the land will be a desolation, so you will know that I am Yahweh. We've seen this phrase pop up a lot, and I don't mean this as like a trick question, but how does this happening let them know that he is Yahweh? Like he says that everything's going to get destroyed, so you will know that I'm Yahweh. How do those two connect?
Well, on one hand, it's because he's directly saying it's going to happen ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So he's predicting it. But also, I would say it ties to the Torah, mm-hmm. to where he said, like Deuteronomy, he's like, hey, if you do this, this is what I'm going to do. Well, they're doing these things. The prophets have called them out on it. And so it logically follows that that desolation should come afterwards. Mm-hmm. And I think that even sets up their response. Because a lot of people are saying, yeah, you've been saying that for centuries, right? If you actually were who you claimed to be, and if you were serious in the curses you promised in Torah, why isn't the land desolate already? You know, so like you understand why they might respond that way. Because they're like, if we were actually guilty, did she fall? Yes. I love that we have it on camera, and I love that it's going to be on camera. And since I saw all of y'all looking, and I knew, I was like, she's probably about to fall, but I wasn't going to distract us. I was like, I knew it was going to happen. But anyways, that's great. Good job. I don't even know what I was saying.
About them basically saying, like, why haven't you made the land desolate?
Oh yes. But you could understand how, given what he said in Torah, you could almost like understand, I guess, why some of the people would be rejecting the prophets. Because they could be saying, okay, if God was actually mad at us, why hasn't he kicked us out of the land? Like, why aren't we destroyed? Because we've been doing this stuff for centuries and we're still here. So obviously, either God is not as powerful as he thought, or he's not as mad at us as y'all seem to think he is.
Yeah.
And this is where Ezekiel says, let me clarify. You're wrong on both accounts. He is as powerful as he says he is, and he is as angry as Torah says he would be.
Yeah. He's
just been gracious. Because guess what Torah also says? Exodus 34. Slow to anger, abounding in love. He's like, he'll wait. But no, that whenever, whenever he rolls up his sleeves, he ain't putting on the Ritz. He's gonna go for it. So.
I think there's also to make like a kind of analogy here. I think if the people took a step back and zoomed out for a second, they would realize that like this already has been partially fulfilled because, they might be because they're in Jerusalem, they might be inclined to think that God hasn't actually done anything yet. But if you just think for a second, by this point in time, Israel's in exile. Half of Judah's in exile.
Where's the tribe of Reuben?
They're down to this little bit. It's like thinking that you're not it's almost like someone who's their life is so down the gutter that they don't realize how bad they're in until they get kicked out. they get kicked out of their parents kick them out or something, and it's like, oh crap, like this didn't happen overnight. This was like a long time of like and now you take a step back and you realize like how far down, like what's the saying with like the whole like stairway to hell where it's like,
oh, it's the safest road to hell is not a or the safest road to hell is a gradual slope without any signposts or turns, towards like you're slowly making your way there and you don't realize you're going downhill, then you learn and you're like, oh crud.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, like Shiloh's been destroyed, Israel's in exile, part of Judah's in exile. It's not like nothing's happened yet.
Yeah.
Like they already have all of these things. Like you could say, if anything, these have all happened as a sort of warning sign, as a sort of mercy from God to be like, you still have time to get your act together.
Yeah.
But they don't. It's almost like we won't take it seriously until we've been punished.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like it's the meme of like the dog in like the burning house being like, I'm fine, everything's fine. It's like, well, and I guess you could almost argue that like, especially like the people back then, they had the opposite view of the world as we do nowadays, because we live in like this super technologically advanced world where like we know of all the different problems going on in the world at all times, and so people are just living in a constant state of anxiety. And it's not that the world is worse in some ways, but in many ways we're just more aware of it, because like when you turn on the TV or if you go on social media, you're more aware of what's going on, right? Earlier Brand and I were talking about like how like, you know, every time you turn on like TV or social media, it's like, ooh, another plane crashed. Yes, planes have always been crashing. They're just reporting about it more. Like it's like
because they know it gets like views.
They know it gets views, right? And so, but in ancient times, you know, yeah, sure, the 10 tribes in the north were sent off into captivity. That doesn't affect us. It's like, you know, and if you're like a person living in Jerusalem, like you might not even like you've never even been up there, you know, and so it's like it doesn't really affect you at all. So yes, if you were to draw out a map and show, oh yeah, like literally over half of our nation has just been shipped off, that would be concerning. But for the person just like with your feet on the ground, if you're not like a prince or a ruler, you're like, okay, whatever. We didn't even like those guys. We split off from them a few centuries ago. And then, I mean, yes, you've had like, you know, sieges laid on the city, but they've been delivered. And so you can see how from their perspective, man, that's okay, yeah, sure. Some people were sent off to captivity, but we're not destroyed yet. So we didn't even like those kings, right? So,
it's true.
It's just an interesting thing that we take for granted nowadays.
Yeah. Probably one last thing I would mention in this section is in like verse 24, it says there will no longer be any worthless visions or flattering divination in the midst of the house of Israel. Or the next section we're going to read, but I guess really throughout the book as well. But this whole like theme of like worthlessness, where like the word there I believe is shah, which is like empty, vain. Like it's the same word as like in Exodus when you don't take the Lord's name in vain. This idea of like vain or empty, or it's like not profitable. To where like a big problem that God's going to have with these leaders is that everything they're doing is not beneficial, it's empty. And like I said, like we're going to read about these prophets, but like these like visions and divinations are having, they're worthless because they don't actually help anybody.
Yeah.
The whole thing is that there's this destruction that's going to come, and so these people are in charge of making sure that they are protecting the city, they're protecting their people, and so if they're doing anything that doesn't help the people out, it's worthless.
Yeah.
Whereas Ezekiel is trying to he's trying to warn the people, and so like it's kind of the opposite. He's trying to protect them, but the leadership is not protecting the people, and so they're being worthless.
Yeah.
And we're gonna see that as kind of a theme throughout. But
yeah, well, and like a lot of the stuff they're saying is like, hey, God loves you, everything's fine, and I think what he's emphasizing there is things are going to get so bad very shortly that on one hand, nobody's going to even be able to say that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, if they did, nobody would believe them. Whereas right now, they're in a place where God has been so gracious that they can listen to the false prophets, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And again, just to highlight the consistency with people nowadays, I mean, this is what the New Testament talks about with like, you know, people love messages that tickle their ears.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, both in the church and out of the church, it's like, people just like, you know, they want the shirts that say, you are enough, or like, I am, like, you know, just like, it's almost like flattering stuff, but if you just think about it, they're just like these quotes that mean nothing,
mm-hmm.
right? It's like, what does you are enough even mean? Like, enough for who? Like, it's like, from a Christian context, it makes more sense, but then you have to say, okay, but am I? Like, You know what I mean? And like, but people like these phrases because they sound good, but they're really just little nothings. And it's like that's what was going on back then, where it was like, hey, you're God's chosen people. You're a royal priesthood. You're a kingdom of priests. And the prophets over there are like, y'all aren't living like it though. Like, it's like to where it's like, yeah, you can say those words, but they mean nothing. And so.
Yeah, whenever, like I said, we'll talk about it more in this next chapter, but like it actually makes me think of with James when he says faith without works is dead. Mm-hmm. The idea, we talked about this when we went through James, but a part of that whole like being dead, like dead faith is like useless faith. Yeah. It's not of any benefit to anybody. If all you have is your belief, this like intellectual belief of who Jesus is, you're not really helping anybody out. Yeah. Something we've talked a lot about before is how faith is a very communal thing. We're helping each other out. Yeah. And especially, we're talking about leadership here. They have responsibility for people below them, people under their authority. We've talked before about how like the main role of authority is to take care of people below you, to not abuse your authority. And it's kind of the same thing for us. Like, if we're not actively using our faith to help and protect people around us, it's useless. And so I think that there's kind of a similar kind of vein, no pun intended, going through that, to where like these people are not supposed to just like, they're supposed to be benefiting the people around them. That's their whole goal. But yeah. Anything else in this section before we move on?
Yeah, I think we'll move on. I don't remember the rest real quick, but
okay.
Yeah. It's already 8:10 by the way.
8:10. Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, start chapter 13. So I'll just go ahead and read all the way through because it's all kind of one thing. Then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the prophets of Israel, who prophesy, and say to those who prophesy from their own hearts, Hear the word of Yahweh. Thus says Lord Yahweh, Woe to the wickedly foolish prophets, who are walking after their own spirits, and have seen nothing. O Israel, your prophets have been like foxes among waste places. You have not gone up into the breaches, nor did you build the wall around the house of Israel, to stand in the battle of the day of Yahweh. They behold worthlessness and lying divination, who are saying, Yahweh declares, when Yahweh has not sent them, yet they wait for the establishing of their word. Did you not see a worthless vision and speak of a lying divination when you said, Yahweh declares, but it is not I who have spoken? Therefore, thus says Lord Yahweh, because you have spoken worthlessness and beheld a lie, therefore behold, I am against you, declares Lord Yahweh. So my hand will be against the prophets who see worthless visions and utter lying divinations. They will not be in the council of my people, nor will they be written down in the register of the house of Israel, nor will they enter the land of Israel, that you may know that I am Lord Yahweh. It is definitely because they have misled my people by saying peace when there is no peace. And when anyone builds a wall, behold, they plaster it over with whitewash. So tell those who plaster it over with whitewash that it will fall. A flooding rain will come, and you, O hailstones, will fall. And a stormy wind will break out. Now behold, the wall will fall. Will it then not be said to you, Where is the plaster with which you plastered it? Therefore, thus says Lord Yahweh, I will make a stormy wind break out in my wrath. There will be also in my anger a flooding rain, and hailstones to consume it in wrath. So I will pull down the wall, which you plastered over with whitewash, and bring it down to the ground, so that its foundation is laid bare, and it will fall, and you will be consumed in its midst, and you will know that I am Yahweh. Thus I will spin my wrath on the wall, and on those who have plastered it over with whitewash. And I will say to you, the wall is gone, and its plasterers are gone, the prophets of Israel who prophesy to Jerusalem, and who see visions of peace for her when there is no peace, declares Lord Yahweh. Now as for you, son of man, set your face against the daughters of your people who are prophesying from their own hearts. Prophesy against them and say, Thus says Lord Yahweh, Woe to the women who sew magic bands on all wrists and make veils for the heads of persons of every stature to hunt down souls. Will you hunt down my people's souls but preserve your own souls? For handfuls of barley and fragments of bread you have profaned me to my people, to put to death souls who should not die, and to keep other souls alive who should not live, by your lying to my people who listen to lies. Therefore, thus says Lord Yahweh, behold, I am against your magic bands by which you hunt souls there as birds, and I will tear them from your arms, and I will let their souls go, the very souls whom you hunt as birds. I will also tear off your veils, and deliver my people from your hands, and they will no longer be in your hands to be hunted, and you will know that I am Yahweh. Because you disheartened the righteous with falsehood, when I did not cause him grief, but have strengthened the hands of the wicked, not to turn from his evil way and preserve his life. Therefore, you women will no longer see worthless visions or practice divination, and I will deliver my people out of your hand. Thus you will know that I am Yahweh.
Nice. Beauty.
So what happens there?
So basically, he just starts criticizing the prophets, both the men and the women.
Yeah.
And just telling them to stop being stupid and trying to cover up bad situations.
Yeah. And again, like a lot of it, like there's this idea of like worthless visions and like lying divination. Is there anything that stuck out to y'all here? There's a few things I want to go over in detail, but I don't want to do all the talking.
I think that, just starting with verse 3, when he says, "Woe to the wickedly foolish prophets who are walking after their own spirit and see nothing." One thing we consistently see through Scripture, and like this chapter really highlights it, is how seriously God takes His word and how offended He is when people misuse it. Because these people are going around and they're saying, "Thus says the Lord," and He's like, "Do you take that lightly?" And like, this is the definition of taking the Lord's name in vain, right? To where whenever, like nowadays, this is something like another pet peeve of mine. Whenever like the modern church talks about taking the Lord's name in vain, we typically think of 3 words: "Oh my God." And I'm not saying you should go around throwing that around, but that's literally just not what the command means.
It's like the most superficial meaning of it.
Yeah, it's a very superficial meaning that makes it very easy. Whereas, like, if you attach God's name to something that He is not explicitly behind, that is taking the Lord's name in vain. And there are a lot of broad applications to that, right? If you say that you are doing something because you, like, if you say, "Oh, well, I'm doing this in the name of God," and you're not doing it, that's taking His name in vain. If you say, "Well, you know what? The Lord told me that I need to share this with you," if that did not come from God, you have taken His name in vain. If you walk up to your boyfriend or girlfriend and say, "The Lord told me we need to break up," and He did not explicitly tell you that, you just took the Lord's name in vain, right? Like, that's what it is. And right here, God says, "How dare you?" Like, He calls them wicked and foolish. He says, "How wickedly foolish are you?" First off, you're evil. Second off, you're stupid. Don't do that. Because it's like the only reason you would do that is if you don't have a high enough view of God. And so the prophets are constantly like trying to get you to go, "No, God is way up here. You can't just throw around His name." And unfortunately, this is a lesson that we have not learned in our churches to this day. To where when we think of taking the Lord's name in vain, we simply make it a super small, superficial thing. But we take His name in vain all the time. And even from the pulpit we do sometimes. To where we're like, "The Lord told me that this is the passage we need to go through today." Did He? Like it's almost like to where like pastors feel the need to justify their sermon. It's like, you can just preach through what you want to preach through. Like, you don't have to defend it like that, you know? And like it's a very dangerous thing to me, because like I get really convicted about how sometimes like pastors fall short, because the way that pastors do things is going to affect how congregations view God. And if we take His name in vain from the pulpit, they're going to take His name in vain in their lives. And so that's stuff I get very convicted about, because I'm like, don't do that. Like, it's such, we view it as such small things. But if you read the Bible, God does not view it as small. He's like, "Don't throw around my name unless it actually came from me." And it makes sense, like, from a human perspective. I mean, like, I wouldn't want somebody saying something from attaching my name to something that I did not say. Now, there have been times where, even at VBS this like last week, I had one of my students be like, "Hey, do you remember like whenever you taught us this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do not think I would teach you that." Like, I was like that I can see how you misinterpreted what I said, but that is not what I said. And I'm like, it's very important for me that you know that it's not what I said. because I don't want people to misrepresent me and take my name in vain.
Yeah.
And so if we don't like it when people do that to us, we shouldn't do it to God. Because
Yeah.
I am here and God is way up there. And so.
Yeah. And like in this case, you don't want to put God in a box either and say God would do or wouldn't do X, Y, Z. To where like in this case, part of taking God's name in vain here, or like having these like worthless visions, is like when they say God won't destroy us, or God won't do this, or God will do this, that's also taking his name in vain too. To where here, like as we're going to read, they're not doing their job because they are attributing God like to doing or not doing things that he never said he would or wouldn't do.
Yeah. Well, and they're saying the exact opposite, right? They're saying, hey, God is not going to destroy you. God is happy with you. And Ezekiel's like, that is quite literally the opposite of what God is saying. If you want to know what God is saying, let me tell you. And it's quite literally Uno reverse card. Like, just it's the opposite. Like, God is not happy with you. He's going to destroy you. And again, modern application drives me nuts. Like, how many sermons we hear nowadays where it just boils down to, hey, you know what? Like, it's okay. We all mess up, which is true. It is true. We all mess up. But it's just like, hey, Jesus, he's just so happy with you, right? He's just so happy that you tried. And I'm like, well, no, like Jesus can love us and also not be happy with us 100% of the time, right? And usually it's because he loves us that there are times where he's not happy, because it's like, hey, like we're bringing, I think of Romans whenever Paul is saying like, because of you, the name of God is blasphemed amongst the nations. Like, he's like getting onto the church. He's like, no, like all because God loves you does not mean that he has to be happy with you all the time. If you're living in sin, but you're calling yourself a follower of Christ, no, he's probably not happy with you. Does that mean that you're out of like that you can't be forgiven? No, you can absolutely be forgiven. But do not trick yourself into thinking that he is just like smiling down upon you as you are living in sin. It's like, no, he didn't. Like, that's what the false prophets were telling the people of Judah. And Ezekiel's like, that could not be further from the truth. You do not know the character of God. Yet that's the same thing we preach nowadays. And it drives me nuts, because it's no wonder so many people are content to live in sin.
Yeah.
Because they're washed in the blood of the Lamb.
That or kind of almost not exactly the opposite, but like prosperity preachers, when they say like God wouldn't allow faithful people to suffer, basically.
Yeah.
And so the idea is, if you are suffering, it's because you're not being faithful enough.
Joe has entered the chat.
Every major biblical figure is like,
And Abraham and Paul and Moses, just like.
But the idea is, if they're teaching that to the congregation, then like they're being taught they're being taught things about God that when things happen, they're gonna be, if anything, tempted to leave the faith. Yeah. And to where,
no, that's true.
Again, so these people that are in leadership, they're not just simply not doing their job. They're doing the opposite of protecting. They're actually like harming their people.
Yeah. So, in the last few decades, the number one reason people have left the church is primarily due to like hypocrisy in the church. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, though, and I would still say that this is like the second reason, is because people have a tough time reconciling why good things, or like why bad things happen to good people, right? It's the whole problem of evil question. And that really does show how poorly a job we've done at teaching the scriptures. Because from beginning to end, God makes it very, literally, the climax of the first book of the Bible is Joseph turning to his brothers and saying, yeah, I did nothing wrong. My life kind of sucked, but God's still good. Like his whole thing is he's saying, yeah, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. Like, that is the first book of the Bible. Like, that is the message of it. It's saying, yes, humans suck, we live in a broken world, but God can still accomplish good through it. And guess what? That good might not necessarily be for you. Because Joseph's conclusion is not that that he went through evil so that God could bless him. God allowed him to go through evil so that he could bless his enemies. And so, it's like, that's the first book of the Bible, yet we've done a bad job at showing that to people. And so, we shouldn't be surprised whenever people do leave the faith, because they're like, I thought that following Jesus meant that, like, my marriage was supposed to be healthy, and that I was supposed to get the job promotion, and that I wasn't supposed to get the cancer diagnosis. Like, that's what we've got, like, a lot of people have taught people, and even outside of prosperity preaching, sometimes that just slips into our own, like even in our churches, like, where we denounce the prosperity gospel, but even the way we pray sometimes, or the way we talk about things, it's like, oh yeah, God blessed me with a new job. It's like, okay, that job can be a blessing, but it also can be a curse depending on what you do with it. Yeah. Oh, you got a promotion. That can be a blessing, or it can make you greedy and it can turn you against God, in which case it wasn't a blessing at all. And so it's like we naturally just think of things in such material ways, and it sets people up for failure because, whenever God doesn't do that, we're like, God failed, and God's like, no, you just didn't know my character, and it's because people were taking my name in vain and attaching motives to things that I did not ever affirm. Right? What were you gonna say?
I was just going to say it's almost like our culture has taught us that we're entitled to good things happening to us in life, and that's not true at all.
Yeah.
It
Well,
sort of raises us all with a sense of like inherent entitlement.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't help that that's what we naturally want. Like it's a message we like to hear. Like, we want to hear, hey, things are gonna get better. Like, and interestingly, that is the story of Scripture, that things are gonna get better. Just not in this life, yeah. To where, like, I've been in Revelation right now, and, like, Jesus, he's, like, right, talking to the church in Smyrna, and he's like, hey, be faithful unto death, and if you are, you're going to receive the crown of life. So he's like, yeah, you've got a really good gift coming for you, but if you want that gift, you're going to have to die first. It's like, okay, so, but that's the consistent message of Scripture, and if we don't represent it that way, like, people are going to fall away, and that's what's going on here as well.
Your life's not going to get saved by a fortune cookie, guys.
Yeah.
So, in verse 4, he says, O Israel, your prophets have become like foxes among waste places. You have not gone up into the breaches, nor did you build the wall around the house of Israel to stand in the battle on the day of Yahweh. What does he mean there?
So it seems like he's contrasting the false prophets with true prophets, right? So like Ezekiel is the true prophet who's functioning like a watchman on the walls, and he's looking out and he sees the danger and he's reporting it, and he's been through the trenches, right? He's like, I've been there, I've seen what's going on, I'm reporting the truth. Whereas they are like foxes in the waste places, to where it sounds like they're just scavenging, right? To where they're just going around and they're just preying on the weak.
Yeah.
And they're just like trying to get whatever's left over and like using that to devour for themselves.
So the imagery, like the word fox can mean like fox or jackal, and then waste places is the same word for like desolate or like ruins. So the idea is like literally like, especially if you're considering what we're talking about here, it's like as if Jerusalem is in ruins and they're just simply picking the scavenging. Yeah. Like
they're just looking for some sort of prey to feed upon.
Yeah. And then he says, you did not go up into the breaches, nor did you build the wall around the house of Israel. So those are both imageries of protection. I wasn't sure at first what it meant by gone up into the breaches until I realized, so like if there's a hole in the wall, like if there's a battle going on, soldiers would go into the hole to defend it from invaders going in. And so the idea is you are not standing up for the people. You're not going into the breaches to defend Jerusalem, to defend the people, and you're not building up you're neither defending the breaches and you're not building up defenses to protect it. So the idea is you're not protecting the people, but you're actually feeding off of them.
Yeah.
And then, as you read later on with the women, it was like they were hunting after the souls of people, like as if they were birds. So there is this idea of the leadership preying off of the weak people, but they're actually just looking out for themselves.
And that's a consistent portrayal of like false teachers throughout Scripture. I mean, even when you get to the New Testament, usually like the number one attribute assigned to false teachers is greed. And it's not necessarily just meaning like monetary greed. It's just, it's self-serving, right? To where they'll put on a guise of caring about the person, but it's just so that they can get that person to buy into whatever they're trying to sell. And so, it's a consistent portrayal.
Yeah. And then verse 9, it's kind of a scary verse, but he says, "They will not be in the council of my people, nor will they be written down in the register of the house of Israel, nor will they enter the land of Israel, that you may know that I am Lord Yahweh." Which I kind of have a couple thoughts here. First of all, is there like anything that's kind of reminds you of some of the language here? It says, "Nor will they enter the land of Israel." But he's talking. First of all, he's talking to people in Israel, but
the language in particular, like, is this calling back to Genesis? Is that what you're thinking of?
Kind of. I'm actually kind of thinking of like Numbers.
Oh.
With the people not like the bad reports. How he says like.
Oh, okay.
Because they're rebellious. The thing is, they're giving bad reports that are like, saying that God can't, we can't overcome these people, and so God says, you and your children will not enter the promised land.
Okay, I was thinking Genesis 49, whenever Jacob is blessing his sons. We say blessing his sons, but the first 3 sons don't really get a good, blessing. But so whenever he turns to Simeon and Levi, and keep in mind that Levi is like the ancestor of all the priests, he says, their swords are implements of violence. Let my soul not enter their council. Let not my glory be united with their assembly. Because in their anger they killed men, and in their self-will they hamstrung oxen. So like the language there, where Jacob says, I will not enter their assembly, and I will not enter their council, and it's because they basically, in their greed and their self-will, they went and they harmed other people. And so to me, the language seems similar.
That actually seems like a closer parallel than what I was thinking.
No.
Gotcha. I think really they kind of both are in play here because I think part of this is it's kind of saying he's disowning them. He's basically saying that they're not really part of Israel.
Yeah.
He's saying you'll call yourselves part of Israel, but you're really not. Yeah. And so they're not going to enter the land. And so it's this idea of how the first wilderness generation, because of their disbelief, were not able to enter the promised land. I think the same thing's kind of going on here, and this makes sense when you consider again, the language throughout all of this. It's Ezekiel's a new Moses. There's this repeated phrase of "Know that I am Yahweh," and there's all these plagues and pestilences he's talking about doing, and there is this destruction to Israel. Jerusalem is kind of like the one he's going to do to Egypt. It makes sense that them returning back to the land is kind of like when they're in exile, they're basically the second wilderness wanderings, to where he's saying that because of their disbelief, they're not going to re-enter back into the promised land.
They're going to die in the wilderness.
They're going to die in the wilderness because he does talk about how he's going to scatter them.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's kind of part of what's going on here.
And this is why James later on says, not all of you should be teachers. For those who teach will be judged more strictly. Because consistently throughout Scripture, it's the people in leadership, the people that, the prophets are not typically going after the average everyday person. Because those people are the victims of these corrupt, leaders.
Yeah.
The leaders, though, they're accountable. Not only for themselves, but for everybody else. To where, yes, everybody is accountable for their own actions, but the leaders, they're accountable for the actions of the people that God has entrusted to them. And then, it also reminds me of James's brother, Jesus, whenever Jesus is criticizing the Pharisees, and he says, yeah, you travel across land and sea to make converts, but in the end, you just make them twice the children of hell as yourselves. And that's kind of what Ezekiel is saying to them. He's like, okay, you have gone around saying, thus says Yahweh, and as a result, you have given people a false understanding of who Yahweh is, what he wants, and what he's doing. And so not only have you committed an error, but you have led other people to be totally unprepared for what's going on here, and rather than defending them, you have harmed them. Therefore, you are not going to be in the future kingdom, right? You're done. He is wiping you out of his book. And it's yikes.
Yeah, scary.
Yeah. And I think even for those people who, maybe you're not in a leadership role, there is this general principle where to go back to Exodus again, with Pharaoh, whenever you're reading the story, it starts off with him hardening his heart. But after a while, it's God himself who hardens his heart.
Yeah.
To where God will meet you where you're at. And if you harden your heart, he's like, okay, well, I'll help you out. But if you soften your heart, he will also help you out there too. And so if these leaders are determined to not listen to him, then he will just cut off their access to him altogether. And he says, okay, originally you had access to my counsel, but because you're resisting, you're not listening to my word, okay, then I'll just cut you off from my counsel altogether, and I will actually confuse your mind so that you're incapable of actually arriving at truth. And Jesus does the same thing, to where whenever you look at the beginning of his ministry, he teaches very clearly. And he's like, hey, you want to know what I stand for? Love your neighbor and your enemy. And he's very straightforward. He's like, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery. I say, don't lust. He's very straightforward. But as people continue rejecting him, he says, the kingdom of heaven is compared to a mustard seed. He starts teaching in parables, and he starts hiding the message, and his apostles are like, Jesus, why are you all of a sudden teaching in stories? And he quotes Isaiah, and he says, so that having ears they will not hear, and though they have eyes they will not see. So he says, I am doing this as judgment, and I am concealing my message from them because they're not listening anyways. So the only people who are going to understand are those who are actually willing to hear me. Mm-hmm. And so there's like a consistent theme where God, like, if you don't want to hear him, he will make it harder for you. And so whether you're in a leadership position or not, if you live in sin, you shouldn't be surprised when down the road you can't, like, you open up scripture and you're like, I don't even know what it's saying. Like, to where it's like if you harden yourself against God, he will make it so that you just don't understand him at all. Whereas if you are walking in obedience to him and you are submitting to him and you are trying to hear him, well, his spirit will help you understand him better and give you wisdom. And I've even seen that in my own life, to where there are times where, like, if I'm like embracing sin, like all of a sudden I like sit down and read scripture and I'm like, why is none of this making sense to me? And like I'm all of a sudden like having like grab a bunch of commentaries and be like, I don't know what's going on, and I'm like, oh, I probably need to repent of something. But
yeah. One thing I wanted to ask about, I kind of have an answer to this, and I don't know, it might be a stretch, but I do kind of want to explore it. But first I want to have y'all's opinions. The whole thing about the plastering and like the walls being torn down, because it mentions it a lot. What do y'all think's going on there?
So to me, it seems like it's describing like there's a breach in the wall, and rather than actually addressing the root problem and fixing the hole, they're just covering it up. And they're saying, look, the wall's fine. It's again, to the same passage I was quoting with Jesus earlier, when he was criticizing the Pharisees for being children of hell. A little bit later on, he says that they're whitewashed tombs. To where he says, okay, you can take a tombstone and cover it in white paint, but it's still covering up a dead man's body. Like, it's like, like you're not addressing the root problem here. And so, if you go back earlier, you've got this theme of like there being a hole in the wall. Mm-hmm. And these guys, what they should do is be like, hey, that's a weakness. Like we need to strengthen that. But what they're doing is they're just putting like plaster over it and then painting it to where, it looks fine. It's not actually addressing the systemic structural issue. It's just an aesthetic thing to cover up the deeper problem.
Yeah, I guess that's basically the point I was going to get at, but I wanted to actually read a passage from Leviticus to help draw even more insight on this, because again, I think just for further insight, like we're talking about Ezekiel, and a lot of the imagery throughout has been like priestly imagery.
Levitical.
I think that like there's actually Levitical imagery going on here.
Okay.
And say I can read it, or if you want to read it, so I'm not doing all the reading. But
what's the passage?
Leviticus 14, specifically 33 through 57, so the back half.
Leviticus 14. Is this with like the patches on the leper's house? Okay. How far?
Well, really that whole section, like 33 through 57.
Bring it on. I'm gonna do it. All right.
So you're reading the exact same amount of verses as the entire chapter.
All right. Yahweh further spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, when you enter the land of Canaan, which I am giving you for a possession, and I put a mark of leprosy on a house in the land of your possession, then the one who owns the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, something like a mark of leprosy has become visible to me in the house. The priest shall then command that they empty the house before the priest goes in to look at the mark, so that everything in the house need not become unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to look at the house. So he shall look at the mark, and if the mark on the walls of the house has greenish or reddish depressions, and appears deeper than the surface of the wall, then the priest shall come out of the house to the doorway, and put the house under isolation for 7 days. And the priest shall return on the 7th day and look again. If the mark has indeed spread in the walls of the house, then the priest shall command them to tear out the stones with the mark in them, and throw them away at an unclean place outside the city. And he shall have the house scraped all around inside, and they shall pour out the plaster that they scraped off at an unclean place outside the city. Then they shall take other stones and replace those stones, and he shall take other plaster and replaster the house. If, however, the mark breaks out again in the house after he has torn out the stones and scraped the house, and after it has been replastered, then the priest shall come in and look again. If he sees that the mark has indeed spread in the house, it is a leprous malignancy in the house. It is unclean. He shall therefore tear down the house, its stones and its timbers, and all the plaster of the house, and he shall take them outside the city to an unclean place. Moreover, whoever goes into the house during the time that he has put it under isolation becomes unclean until evening. Likewise, whoever lies down in the house shall wash his clothes, and whoever eats in the house shall wash his clothes. If, on the other hand, the priest comes in and looks again, and the mark has not indeed spread in the house after the house has been replastered, then the priest shall pronounce the house clean, because the mark has not reappeared. To cleanse the house then, he shall take 2 birds and cedar wood and scarlet string and hyssop, and he shall slaughter the one bird in the earthenware vessel over the running water. Then he shall take the cedar wood and the hyssop and the scarlet string with the live bird, and he shall dip them in the blood of the slaughtered bird, as well as in the running water, and he shall sprinkle the house over 7 times. He shall thus, just sprinkle the house 7 times, not over. He shall thus cleanse the house with the blood of the bird and with the running water, along with the live bird and with the cedar wood and with the hyssop and with the scarlet string. However, he shall let the live bird go free outside the city into the open field. So he shall make atonement for the house, and it will be clean. This is the law for any mark of leprosy, even for a scale, and for the leprosy garment, for a house, and for a swelling, and for a scab, and for the bright spot, to instruct when they are unclean and when they are clean. This is the law of leprosy.
So it's basically taking that principle and expanding it to a scale of the entire city.
Basically, there's kind of a lot going on here, and I know, like I said, there's a lot to read, but I think if you're kind of following where I'm going, hopefully you kind of see where I'm getting at here. It seems like there's a couple things going on here, but it seems like ultimately, if you kind of combine this with the last vision where he did this whole altar incense and the coals and slaughtering the people.
Mm-hmm.
There's this whole atonement imagery. It seems like what's going on here is that God has determined that Jerusalem is an unclean house, is a leper's house. I almost feel like there's a verse somewhere that says Israel is a leper's house or something. But it seems like the idea is that these priests, these false priests, are trying to plaster over this house and attempt to basically hide for, or even they're attempting to almost cover up their sins in that way, to where God has determined that the mark of leprosy is so deep that he's going to have to tear down the whole house and rebuild from the ground up. And there's even the whole imagery of the 2 birds, where he sets one free and slaughters one. You read the second half of this, and you have these women who are praying and hunting these people as birds. And he says that he's going to let them go, like birds, let them go, the ones they were trying to hunt down. And it seems like the imagery there is, again, these people are almost trying to atone in a sense, because they're trying to plaster over, they're trying to slaughter the bird, metaphorically, and they're almost trying to become the bird that goes free, while these people that are innocent take the brunt of it. Whereas God flips the script and says, no, I'm going to pour my wrath out. Wrath is atonement imagery, judgment imagery. It's not just destruction. He says, I will spin my wrath on the wall. Yeah. So he will tear down the leper's house and rebuild it, and he's going to slaughter those people as that bird in the earthenware vessel, and he is going to let the people who are innocent free as the other bird, is what it kind of seems like to me.
Well, it makes sense, because if you just look at what he's talking about in Leviticus, it's a pretty logical sequence of instructions, to where he's basically hey, it seems like leprosy here is talking about mold or something. If there's mold in your house, we need to keep addressing the issue until the mold is gone, right? Yeah. And if you can cover it up, re-examine it a little bit later. If the mold is back, we got to assess it again. And there's this continuous process of re-examination to make sure that you're actually solving the root issue. And so the imagery, at the very least, whether it's a direct reference or not, it's the same message, because the idea is you can't just cover it up. You have to figure out, is the root issue fixed? And plaster alone is not going to fix the issue. You have to examine it and figure out, is it clean or unclean? And in Leviticus, clean and unclean isn't inherently tied to morality. It's just a statement of fact. Is it physically clean? Is it physically unclean? Mold, unclean. No mold, clean. But in this case, you have the moral principle of it in Ezekiel, where it's they are embracing all sorts of evil, sin, and terrible stuff, and they're preaching false prophecies, and they're just trying to patch up the wall. But there's a deeper issue here that they're not addressing, and therefore judgment's going to come for them, because they have become an unclean house.
Yeah. And later, the next chapter we're going to get to, where is that he says that the idols are in their hearts.
Yeah.
So the idea is it's almost as if they even if they took away the idols on the outside, their on the inside there's still like leper, like there's still like that mold on the inside. And then like we read before with the vision where he goes to Jerusalem and the temple and says that there's like, again, the whole thing is like they're worshiping idols in the dark. So he looks through the wall and sees them doing this. The idea is like they're almost like covering up the outside when on the inside they're still doing all the same things.
Okay. Yeah.
If that makes sense. So God's almost taking on this priestly role, which is kind of like what happened in the previous chapter with the guy who went and like struck the people down, which is like, it's almost like there's this guy who's like a high priest, which could be God being the high priest, and he is slaughtering the people, the wicked people, and that's like the blood being like splattered on the city, and he is the one tearing down the leper's house, like the priest in Leviticus.
Yeah. God's literally just the good version of Thanos, being like, fine, I'll do it myself. Like, because it's like, he's looking at Jerusalem, and they're offering poor sacrifices, they're worshiping other gods, the priests and the prophets are corrupt. He's like, fine, alright, well, I guess I'll just turn Jerusalem itself into an altar, and they will be the sacrifice, and I will just cleanse them that way. It's like,
yeah.
Alright.
But again, like, part of the reason I bring this up is because we've already talked about this before, but you have to just keep in mind what the goal is of all of this. The whole goal of all of this in the long term is that God is trying to, like, atone and cleanse he's trying to cleanse the people. Like, he's trying to
He's trying to refine them.
He's trying to refine them. And so it isn't just destruction because they did bad thing. It's like he's thinking long term.
Mm-hmm.
Just like in Genesis when he was trying to work through the patriarchs and make them into people who hear him.
Yeah.
So you start off with Abraham and you end with Joseph. And by the end of it you have a guy who's in Egypt who he has very little contact with God, but yet he hears him better than anybody else.
Yeah.
With Israel, he's doing the same thing. He's trying to get them to people who actually hear Israel, the Lord your God alone. Love the Lord God with all your whole heart, soul, and strength. He's trying to get them to that point.
Yeah, he's trying to get them to where they're not relying on the law written on tablets of stone, but who have the heart, like the law inscribed on their heart.
Yeah, and like how he says that these people are following after their own spirit and have seen nothing. Mm-hmm. He wants to have people who have seen God, and it is written on their hearts.
It's very ironic that he tells them to hear them. It's this constant repetition of like hear, and then once they get back in the land, he's like, okay, I'm going silent for 400 years. There's not going to be any prophets or nothing. Y'all do you, and then he just.
He's probably like, I've given you all enough to think about. Just study what I've given you, and you'll figure it out.
It's like, I'll be chilling in the temple.
Yeah. And then probably just one last thing before we should probably move on. But with the women, he mentions like the magic bands and the veils. The word for magic band there, like both of those words only show up in this chapter like twice. And that's the only time they pop up. But it seems like the word for band is like pillow, where it's like a cloth wrap around.
Oh, okay.
So it's some kind of like spiritual practice, like pagan practice. But you can kind of associate that with like comfort, where it's like a cloth pillow is comfort, and then a veil obviously is like a covering. And so whether it's literal or not, there is this kind of metaphor of like these people are literally blinding and giving these people false senses of comfort. Mm-hmm. And so it says that they're doing this like for handfuls of barley and for fragments of bread. And so again, it's this idea of like self-serving people who are leading people astray. They're giving them false comforts and they're blinding the people to serve themselves. And it's like
it's not even for much. It's it's like you're condemning people to hell for $5. It's like, it's terrible.
Yeah, for a $5 foot long, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. But yeah. There's a lot more we could go through, obviously, but we probably need to move on for time. What time is it, by the way?
8:45.
Okay. Maybe we can push through 14. But is there anything else I wanted to talk about with 13? I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about, but
I think it'll kind of tie into chapter 14 because it's like two sides of the same coin.
I agree. Okay, we shall move on. Chapter 14. Then some elders of Israel came to me and sat down before me. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, these men have set up their idols in their hearts, and have put right before their faces the stumbling block of their iniquity. Should I be inquired by them at all? Therefore speak to them and tell them, Thus says Lord Yahweh, any man in the house of Israel who sets up his idols in his heart, puts right before his face the stumbling block of his iniquity, and then comes to the prophets. I, Yahweh, will be brought to give him an answer in light of it, in light of the multitude of his idols, in order to seize the house of Israel by their hearts, those who are estranged from me through all their idols. Therefore say to the house of Israel, thus says Lord Yahweh, turn back and turn away from your idols, and turn your faces away from all your abominations. For anyone of the house of Israel, or of the sojourners who sojourn in Israel, who separates himself from me, sets up his idols in his heart, puts right before his face the stumbling blocks of his iniquity, and then comes to the prophet to inquire of me for himself, I, Yahweh, will be brought to answer for him in my own person. I will set my face against that man, and make him a sign and a proverb, and I will cut him off from among my people. So you will know that I am Yahweh. But if the prophet is enticed to speak a word, it is I, Yahweh, who have enticed that prophet, and I will stretch out my hand against him and destroy him from among my people Israel. They will bear the punishment of their iniquity. As the iniquity of the inquirer is, so the iniquity of the prophet will be, in order that the house of Israel may no longer wander from me, and no longer defile themselves with all their transgressions. Thus they will be my people, and I shall be their God, declares Lord Yahweh. We'll stop there. So what does he say there? What's the scene?
Seems to me that I was wondering that those like go out of their way to the idolatry in their hearts because they're so enticed by it, then go to try and like reconcile. It's like, no, you've shown for too long that you don't really care, so be gone with you.
Yeah, so I guess the scene is that there's these people, the elders of Israel are talking to Ezekiel. I'm assuming it's because they're trying to inquire of God on his, like, through him. And so what does God tell Ezekiel? He asked the question in verse 3, and then the rest of this section is kind of basically explaining that question.
It's like, should these guys even be asking for me at all? Because I'm clearly not the God who is foremost at their hearts, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they've turned to the left and the right so much that like they don't even recognize me anymore.
Yeah. I'll ask a question. It's not a trick question, but what does he mean when he says these men have set up their idols in their hearts and have gone and have put right before their faces the stumbling block of their iniquity? What does that actually mean?
So I'm assuming that like I could be wrong here, but it seems like there's like almost like an advancement of thought to stuff that's been like talked about before, because usually when we think of idolatry, we think of the physical object.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's like Ezekiel is, because his book is so focused on man needing a new heart, it's like he's advancing it and exposing like the true idol isn't the object, it's what you do in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the stumbling block here is a reference to the object itself, I would assume, towards like the physical statue is the thing which makes it easier to fall into idolatry.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I kind of view it, towards like a, you know, it's the thing you see that leads you into it, but the real issue is the heart issue. I could be wrong there, but that's kind of how I.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that, if it was like that or just like a restatement, like an apposition, because I think in Hebrew it doesn't actually, like in the translation here it says, and have put right before their faces, like as if it's two separate things. I think it just says, idols in their hearts, the stumbling block of their iniquity, in each case. So it just is positioned right after, so it could be like an apposition where it's the same thing. I'm not entirely sure on that. But yeah, I would say that, to go off of what you said, the idea is that these people's hearts aren't fully devoted. Like, something we've talked about throughout the entire Old Testament. We talk about this a lot, especially in Kings, but the idea that what God seeks is only devotion to Him. So it's like, even when you sin against Yahweh. Like when David sinned, he said, I sinned against Yahweh alone. I didn't sin against Baal. I didn't sin against these other gods. I sinned against Yahweh alone.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that these people they're double-minded. They have different gods that they still have devotion to. And so, like I said, even if you take away the physical idols, the idea is that it's still what really comes down to is what you're actually doing in your heart. And so these people are coming to Ezekiel, but they're not fully devoted to Yahweh. And so God's basically saying, like, why should I even answer these people at all?
Yeah, and this is one of those places where it's the same verb back to back, to where it's like, to be inquired, shall I be inquired?
Yeah.
Like to where like we translate it as at all, but it's like it's kind of like in Genesis 3 when it says, from all the trees in the garden you may eat to eat, but if you eat from this one, you will die to die. Like it's repetition.
That's like the in the last chapter it said it is definitely because it's because and because.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I didn't look it up, but the word definitely is not used like it's out of place.
It is definitely because.
Yeah. I figured that's what was going on there. I didn't look it up when you were reading it, but like I was like, that's got to be what it is, because definitely is not a common word that translators use for translating the Bible.
It was weird.
But I was like, it's probably because to because. Like,
yeah, it's because and because.
But yeah, so I was highlighting that just to focus, like to emphasize, it's almost like God's just like astonishment. He's like, Ezekiel, these guys are worshiping idols, not even just before their faces, but like in their hearts. Like, why should I even deal with them? Like, to be inquired, shall I be inquired? Like, who are they to come before me? Like, it's like people who are openly treasonous asking for a favor from a king. It's like, why would I do that? Like, you know that I'm aware of your treason, right? Like, it's like I don't know.
Yeah, like thinking of like other people talking like their significant other or something.
Yeah.
And so what does God say that he will do? That's basically verses like 5 through the end of that section. To the people who will try to inquire of him whenever they are devoted to other gods, basically. What would he do?
Well, first he, says to do something. He says to turn away from the idolatry. And then he basically says he'll bring himself to answer.
Yeah, the very end of verse 7.
The person.
Well, end of verse 7 through like verse 8.
Yeah.
I don't know why. When I initially read this, it almost made me think of like the whole like weird story with King Saul, where like Saul tried. It's a little different, but like Saul tried to inquire of God like after he'd already consulted like all these other means, and like it's different because I guess in all the cases he wasn't trying to consult other gods. He was still trying to consult Yahweh, but like at the very end, it's like Samuel like showed up like in this weird form and like.
You're talking about the end of his life, like the Witch of Endor.
Yeah.
Story?
To where like it's a little different because like I said, Saul wasn't like explicitly like worshiping other gods, but there was this whole thing where like by the end of it, like an Elohim show, like Samuel showed up and spoke to him personally, and like it made him like super like anxious for his life.
Yeah.
To where God basically had to be like, all right, I'm gonna show up and like I'm gonna tell you what's up. To where like I'm not saying that's necessarily what God's saying here, but he is saying like I'm gonna answer them myself.
Yeah. Well, and it is funny specifically because it's the whole they are inquiring of him. He's like, oh, I'll give them an answer, but it's not the answer they're looking. He's like, because he's like, Ezekiel, should I even bother giving these people an answer? And you can imagine Ezekiel like being like, well, and like God's like, you know what? No, I am gonna give them an answer. Like, it's like, oh, Ezekiel's like, just like, oh, this is not going well for them. One thing.
His answer is basically, I'm turning my face against you.
Yeah.
Like I'm turning from you.
And what does that sound like? Deuteronomy 32. Because he literally says in Deuteronomy 32, if they reject me, I will set my face against them.
Yeah.
One thing that's interesting to me, verse 8, I will set my face against that man and make him a sign and a proverb. And throughout the book of Ezekiel, one of the themes that you see like showing up again and again and again is God telling Ezekiel, I will make you a sign to the people.
Yeah.
And now he says, I'm going to make them a sign and a proverb. And so, basically, God is just making everybody signs that lead back to him, but in different ways. To where Ezekiel is a good sign, right? To where, like, he is embodying their destruction ahead of time so that they have time to repent.
Yeah.
These people are embodying their destruction in real time so that everybody else can look and be like, oh crud, we don't want to make Yahweh mad. You know, so it's like,
Yeah.
either way, it's like Ezekiel is assigned to the people of Judah to lead them back to God, whereas these idolatrous elders, they are assigned to the nations. Hey, don't mess up, don't make God angry like we did. So,
Yeah.
it's just interesting, they're both signs.
Yeah. And then verse 9 is also to me interesting. But if the prophet is enticed to speak a word, it is I, Yahweh, who have enticed him to speak. And I will stretch out my hand against him and destroy him from among my people Israel. Where, I guess it's saying, if the prophet decides to say something for himself, God has enticed him to speak, but also God will destroy him.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it sounds very similar to what we're talking about with Pharaoh,
Yeah.
where he hardens his heart, but God also hardens his heart.
Yeah.
And so when it comes down to it, who is it who hardened Pharaoh's heart? Himself or God? Yes. To where this guy was going to do it on his own, God's like, okay, if you're going to make up lies in my name, I'll help you.
Mm-hmm.
And I will entice you to do that. And I will, basically he's helping them give in to their base desires.
Yeah.
And I think this is just God's way of making it to where, in the end, his judgment is fully justified. Right? To where they were already on this path, but he's just, giving them a boost. He's like, all right.
He's a gentleman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that particular verse, it reminds me of something, but I can't put my finger on what exactly it was.
Yeah. With the prophet speaking a word.
Well, specifically with him enticing them and then judging them. It's it reminds me of some language somewhere else, but I don't remember what it is.
I think I might know what you're talking about, but I can't think of it either. For a second I thought it was Balaam, but I don't think that would be Balaam. Because Balaam, he didn't entice him to speak anything bad.
If anything, God was trying to shut him up. and Balaam's like, no, I'm going to talk anyways. And God's like, okay.
And then in verses 10 and 11, we kind of get why God is doing all this to the prophets and the elders, where he's saying that I'm doing this so that the people will finally turn to me.
Well, and one thing's interesting here, these are elders in Babylon with him, correct?
That's what it seems like.
Yeah. So that is intriguing that it's even in Babylon, they have not set aside their idolatry. They're just, they have lost everything. And right now should be the moment where they're like, dang, Isaiah was right. Jeremiah was right. Hosea was right. They were all correct. And at this moment, they should be turning away from the idols. Yet, they're still not doing it. And I can guarantee you the way they justified it is saying, well, you know what? God couldn't save us from the Babylonians, so maybe one of these other gods can. And God's probably like, you're joking. Right? The reason why I let you get destroyed is because you were worshiping the other gods. But that's the twisted logic of it, to where they were like, if we really were God's chosen people, he would have saved us. And
yeah,
that's the whole reason they turned to idolatry, is because God wasn't doing what they wanted him to do. It's but
yeah.
I just think it's wild that he's actually addressing the people in Babylon at this point, to where they have the audacity to come up to Ezekiel and be like, hey Ezekiel, can you ask God? They're acknowledging that Ezekiel is a legitimate prophet who has access to God. And they're like, hey, we would like to ask something. And then God and Ezekiel have this whole conversation where it's these guys.
It's while they're asking Ezekiel to inquire of God, of Yahweh, they're in the back of their head, they're thinking about how they're going to go back home and worship Baal or something.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, hey, could you go ask Yahweh this? Because Baal hasn't given us an answer yet, and so while we're waiting on his response, we just want to see what Yahweh's input is. It's sure, let me just go ask it right now.
I can't wait to go back to the Valley of Hinnom so I can burn my kids to Moloch.
Stupid.
Any other comments on this section? We can probably move on.
Did y'all only read to verse 11?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to move on. Hopefully we can just run through this in 15. I'm just going to read through the end of 14 though. Then the word of Yahweh came to me saying...
I thought you meant verse 14 for a second. I'm like...
Right.
Well,
No, 15 is only 8 verses, and I wanted to get to 15 as well. But then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, if the country sins against me by committing unfaithfulness, And I stretch out my hand against it, break its staff of bread, send famine against it, and cut off from it both man and beast. Even though these 3 men, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in its midst, by their own righteousness, they could only deliver themselves, declares Lord Yahweh. If I were to cause wild beasts to pass through the land, and they bereaved their children, and they became desolate so that no one would pass through it because of the beast, though these 3 men were in its midst, as I live, declares Lord Yahweh, they could not deliver either their sons or their daughters. They alone would be delivered, but the country would become desolate. Or if I should bring a sword on that country and say, let the sword pass through the country and cut off man and beast from it, even though these 3 men were in its midst, as I live, declares Lord Yahweh, they could not deliver either their sons or their daughters, but they alone will be delivered. Or if I should send a plague against that country and pour out my wrath and in blood on it, to cut off man and beast from it, even though Noah, Daniel, and Job were in its midst, as I live, declares Lord Yahweh, they could not deliver either their son or their daughter. They would deliver only themselves by their righteousness. For thus says Lord Yahweh, how much more when I send my 4 calamitous judgments against Jerusalem, sword, famine, wild beast, and plague, to cut off man and beast from it. Yet behold, survivors will be left in it, who will be brought out, both sons and daughters. Behold, they are going to come forth to you, and you will see their way and actions. Then you will be comforted for the calamity which I have brought against Jerusalem, for everything which I have brought upon it. Then they will comfort you when you see their way and actions. So you will know that I have not done in vain all that I did to it, declares Lord Yahweh. All right.
Yikes.
Yoinks. Yeah. So what does God say there?
The people are so terrible that even if, first of all, the men he names, I feel like we have to address this. Noah and Job kind of fit. Well, they do fit. They are like 2 of the greatest examples of righteousness that are laid out in the Bible.
Like when you think of righteousness, those are 2 people you're supposed to think of.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
one guy who literally was so righteous that he was spared from a worldwide flood. Other guy was so righteous that whenever the devil's like, I need a really tough challenge, God's like, pick this guy. So,
Yeah.
definitions of righteous.
And then there's Daniel, which is Ezekiel's contemporary at the time, Daniel. Unless there's like some other, we don't have any other Daniels that it could be in the Bible. So it's kind of like Ezekiel is putting Daniel like up to the standard of Job and Noah. And it's not even Ezekiel who's speaking, it's God who's speaking to Ezekiel.
This is the greatest compliment you could ever give someone. Like, especially keep in mind, Daniel is younger than Ezekiel, probably by like over a decade.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Daniel is currently alive right now. Like, that lets you know, dude had a reputation. Like, whenever we read the book of Daniel, he was like, yeah, like he almost downplays it to where we notice, like, oh, he seems like a significant guy. And he has, like, a reputation to where even Nebuchadnezzar's like, this dude's awesome. But, like, even God's like, no, for real. Like, it makes you wonder, what was Daniel like? Like, because, like, Noah and Job are, like, from thousands of years earlier. Daniel is like alive at that time period. It's like, bro must have been awesome. And like, but I guess the thing they all have in common is that all 3 of them were not ministers to the people of Israel themselves, right? So you got Noah, who was, that was probably before Israel ever existed, and he was specifically ministering to just the world in general, right? And he was preserved, he himself was preserved from judgment. And then you have Job, who he was from the land of Uz, which is basically like he's probably from around the time period of Abraham, or maybe a little bit afterwards. But it's like the region of like Edom, kind of like so, like think like the land of Esau, like right over there, a little bit south of Israel. And so he also was not a member of the people of Israel. And then Daniel, he is also living in Babylon, right? And so the thing they all have in common is that they are these righteous sufferers who, in many ways, like interceded on behalf of other people. But in many ways, they were the ones who were spared from like Noah and his family were the only ones spared from judgment. Job, most of his family also was judged, and then Daniel, his people pretty much all died, but him and his friends had like these really cool stories. And so you'll notice that like verses 12 through 20, the hypothetical scenario is that God says, if I were to afflict nations in general with these judgments, and if these guys interceded, they would only be able to save themselves, right? And that's because God has a lower standard for the Gentile nations because they didn't receive Torah and they didn't receive the prophets, right? So, I mean, like even whenever you see prophets being sent to the other nations, they're getting onto them for much smaller things. It's not like you haven't kept the Sabbaths. Like, they're not going to criticize the nations for that. They're saying you haven't done justice and you haven't been righteous. To where that's basically the standard God holds the general population to. And so he says he has a really low standard for them. But even if these heroes of the faith of righteousness interceded, he would only spare them. Which says a lot, because if you go back to Genesis, with Abraham interceding for Sodom, God was saying, oh yeah, if there's 50 righteous people, I'll spare the whole city. If there's 45, 40, 30, like all the way down to like, yeah. If there's, was it 10 or 5?
I think it was 10.
I think it was 10, yeah, because, he says, if there's 10 righteous people, I'll spare the whole city. So we know how merciful God is. But he says, even if you got the 3 most righteous people you can think of, I still would not spare all of them. And that's just like for a country in general, like a Gentile nation. And then he says, how much more when I send those same calamities on Jerusalem? And you have to go back to Deuteronomy and realize these are the calamities that he promised. And so they should have known this was coming. They have had centuries to prepare. They're supposed to be held to the highest standard. And he's like, if I wouldn't spare the Gentiles, how could I justify sparing Jerusalem? I can't. And so that's a fair point. God is you can't argue with that.
Yeah, God has a track record of, like, he doesn't always spare, he doesn't always spare wicked on account of the righteous, but like you said, even with the Sodom story where, like, Lot and his family were all saved, so, like, even if Lot was the righteous one, like, his wife and daughters were spared, his wife didn't end up being spared, but she was supposed to be. But, like, and then, like, Noah and his family was spared, so, like, even, like, their family was spared, whereas, like, here, you're saying it's even more extreme, where, like, he's saying even Noah's family wouldn't be spared. Like, if Lot was here, even his family wouldn't be spared. It would just be them themselves. And so it's like, it's kind of a step further to where he's no longer sparing, like, I mean, not even necessarily wicked in that case, but, like, he's no longer doing the whole sparing wicked on account of the righteous. It's, like, literally just, he's not sparing anybody.
Yeah.
So, like, the most righteous will be saved, but that's literally it.
Yeah.
That being said, he does say that survivors will be left in it. To me, those verses are very interesting, just because, like, he says that when you see these people and how they are, it's going to be, like, comforting to him, which I just thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, in verse 22?
Yeah, well, it says that, like, they will be comforting to you, and I see.
Well, it just seems like throughout the book, like, everything from the marks on the people that are given, like, when the executioners go into the city with the scribe's case and they put the mark on their forehead, it's only given to those who are, like, crying out against the abominations and the idolatry that's happening, and it's basically signaling that, like, the most righteous people in Jerusalem are the ones who are going to survive.
Yeah.
And those are the people who will eventually be molded and refined into the people that, don't turn to the left or to the right, and they have God as, the one and only God in their hearts.
Yeah, and keep in mind, he says the people who are, like, going against the abominations, like, he's not even saying people who obey Torah, he's saying it's people who have, like, a certain heart displacement, because those are emotions from the heart. So it's having hearts towards God and not towards, like, anything else. I think it's also interesting to note that he ends this chapter ends on God talking about there being comfort, and then he says, so you will know that I have not done in vain all that I did to it. And if you compare this with the last chapter, this is kind of contrasted with the comfort of those, like I said, there's, like, that comfort of the
prophetesses.
The prophetesses, like, there is that false comfort from, like, the lying prophets and all that. he's kind of contrasting that to where instead of being comforted by lying words, you'll be comforted by seeing the people that survive and seeing that God spared them.
Yeah.
And then he says, you will know that I've not done it in vain. And so again, these prophets have been talking, they've been prophesying in vain.
Yeah.
All these empty words where God is saying, this is how you will know that I am not doing that. I'm not prophesying in vain.
Yeah.
You will know, you'll see like the end goal of this. Like Jerusalem will come out stronger essentially.
Yeah.
Because he will spare the people who are actually, his people.
Yeah. Well, and that just further reinforces his character because he keeps saying, thus you will know that I am Yahweh. Like, God is not somebody who says things emptily. Like, it's like, when he says something, there's meaning behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And these other people, they're just like throwing around like just empty nothings that offer false comfort and vain like promises, but they amount to nothing. Whereas God says, you will know it actually came from me when it comes to pass. And again, that's very similar to Moses, because whenever Moses encounters God at the burning bush, he's like, hey Moses, do you know what the sign is that you will know that I actually sent you? Whenever you bring the people back to this mountain. And it's like, okay. It's like, this, you will know that things have come to pass when they've come to pass. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
But basically God is saying that, like, just test me. Like, sit it out, and you will see that my words come to pass.
Mm-hmm.
Other people's words don't. And so if you want to know if it came from me, wait it out. And it will happen.
Yeah.
And so that'd be the difference. Whereas the false prophets, all their promises are going to be nothing, whereas his will actually take place.
Yep.
And I guess the comfort just comes from the fact that, Ezekiel will see these people coming to Babylon, and he'll be like, okay, like God did have, like, he was trying to accomplish something with this, and hopefully the people who are coming to Babylon now, they will not be idolatrous like the elders already in Babylon are.
Yeah, and because of what they witnessed, it will help strengthen their faith as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, what time is it?
9:12.
Okay, so we should probably just stop there then, huh?
Yeah, we'll probably, yeah. Yeah, because we can just start with chapter 15. Like, technically, 15 directly flows from the previous chapters, but that can just be a nice little, like, we can fit that into the context for next week.
It's a nice buffer for us before we get to 16.
Yeah, 16 might be a rough one to just start off with, like, hey everybody, welcome to Bible study. Let's go to chapter 16, because chapter 16 and 23 of Ezekiel are like some of the wildest chapters, so buckle up for that. We're going to have some wild weeks ahead of us. That is we're going to have to be very mature as we go through those chapters. Yeah.
Alright, well, is there anything else anyone else wanted to say? Any last thoughts or applications? Or
I feel like I had another thought about like the Noah, Job, and Daniel thing, but like it slipped in my mind. I've always liked that passage. Like I just...
Yeah, it's one of my favorites in the book too.
Yeah. Well, but it's also just scary. Just because God, like... Just because you know how merciful God is throughout Scripture, and then like he says, yeah, even if like if a country sins against me, even if these guys, like if it's gotten to the point where I'm having to afflict them with these sorts of things, even if those guys appeal to me, I wouldn't listen. Like, because God's basically just, he's showing his standard. And he's like, there is a point of no return. And they can appeal to me all they want. I'm not going to listen. Like, I'll save them, but nobody else. And like that is genuinely scary. Because then he turns and says, yeah, and those are the Gentile nations. How much more for my own people who receive my Torah and who receive my prophets and have rejected both. And I've given them centuries. It's like, yeah, that's not good. But the reassuring thing is that the people who do make it out, they are going to be the ones who are like Noah and Job and Daniel. Like to where the people that he's sparing, they're the cream of the crop, and they will hopefully lead people back to him. So
yes. Quality over quantity.
Yeah, which ties into a big part of like what God's concerned with, right? Again, thing that the modern church needs to remember. Like you're not being successful in fulfilling the Great Commission by just filling up the pews. You're only being successful in fulfilling the Great Commission by making disciples, right? Jesus does not just want 1 million people just being dunked in water. He wants people who follow him.
Yeah.
And a lot of church, like Like we just don't do a very good job at that. Like we prioritize. Okay, well, hey, come up here, pray with me. Let's get you baptized. And God bless you. Have a great life. Like that's kind of how we treat it. Whereas like that's not what the mission was. The mission is make disciples, make followers who are living for Him. And so, yeah, like God wants quality over quantity. And unfortunately, whenever we favor quantity over quality, we end up in situations where there's going to be a lot of people saying, Lord, Lord. And He's going to be like, you are not Noah or Job or Daniel. Sorry.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. And it's like, yikes. That's scary.
Yeah.
But
anybody else?
Remove the idols from your hearts.
True.
Well, that's kind of the cool thing about the whole message of Ezekiel is that when it comes down to it, you can't. To where God's like, fine, I'll do it. Like God's literally going to have to perform surgery. And we talked about this last week, to where it almost kind of could allude back to Genesis, where He like in order to make a bride for Adam, He like removes Adam's rib and forms one for Himself, to where it's like, in order to make a bride for Himself, He is having to do the surgery and remove the heart of stone and put in a new heart, so that finally His own bride will love Him. Because right now, as we're going to see next week, she's playing the harlot. And so it's very interesting where God's like, okay, I'll do this.
Yeah, and just like Jerusalem had these walls that were built up that were not, they were leprous. The same way like the heart, our hearts have like that wall of stone around it.
Yeah.
And so God's going to tear down those walls and fix it Himself. And there's nothing we can really we have to make sure we're not just trying to hide that from Him.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole thing throughout this whole book is, we can't be deceived into thinking that God doesn't see what we're doing at all times.
You can't hide from
To where
God.
you can go to church on Sundays, and that doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're fully devoted to Him.
Yeah.
But God knows that,
Yeah.
and so you can try to hide it all you want, but you can't hide it from God.
Yeah. So this is kind of a joke, but it relates to what you're talking about here, and it's also kind of a serious point. But you said tearing down these walls, and it made me think of a video I was watching a few weeks ago where it was a worship leader just talking about how every if you just look at the most popular worship songs being released every few years, there's just certain trends that become I don't know, it just shows how worship music is not really being written from the heart nowadays. Usually it's more just hey, what will sell? And there's certain trends. And the most recent trend is references to Joshua and Jericho and walls falling down. To where if you look at the top 40 worship songs of the last 10 years, or maybe even 5 years, it's all about God tearing down walls and us shouting and the walls come tumbling down and stuff. And it's funny because the whole video is he just said, okay, well let's just go through some of these lyrics and analyze it. And pretty much this ties into Ezekiel, because when you look at it, it's very hard to discern what this song is actually trying to communicate. And usually it is a faulty understanding of what even took place at Jericho. To where it'll be oh yeah, our shout is the song, is the sound which causes the walls of Jericho to come down. And it's that's not even what happened at Jericho. No, God made the walls come down. The people were just obeying God. It wasn't them shouting that made the walls come down. You're giving credit to yourself for something that God did. And the whole thing is the guy, he did it in a very funny way, to where it wasn't being overly just cynical, but I would be more overly cynical. But it was funny because it ties to what Ezekiel talks about, where it's just these empty things, to where people love the imagery of oh yeah, God's tearing down these walls. And it's okay, what does that mean? Explain that to me. Because there are ways where you can use that metaphor and it says something. But how you're doing it right now, it sounds good. And a lot of modern worship music is like that. To where if you actually break down the lyrics, they aren't saying a lot. They're just these phrases that people and they throw them in there, and it sounds good, and we're okay, it's easy to sing, but you're what are you actually talking about here? And what are you praising God for? Because sometimes you might have to have walls built up. What is the context in which you're praising? When you read the Psalms, like David uses a lot of metaphors, but like there's a logic to it, you know, to where you're like you understand what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in a lot of songs nowadays, it's just like, well, people like songs about walls falling down, so let's write a song about Jericho. And
Yeah.
I just
It's almost like AI wrote it or something.
it is a lot of songs sound like that, and then it doesn't help that like AI actually is writing songs now too. So
It's true.
and then we're just mixing it all together to where yeah.
You can't tell which is which now.
You can't. But yeah, I thought it was interesting because it ties into what Ezekiel's talking about.
That's true.
Where we're guilty of the same stuff nowadays, but we give ourselves a pass because we're Christians. We're not like those people back then. We would never reject God or not take His word seriously.
And God would never punish us. Alright, T. Someone want to pray us out? Maybe someone who didn't pray earlier.
Yes, I'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you for allowing us to follow me tonight and use wisdom to get more focused on you than any circumstances that seem very difficult for us, and just no matter what, just trust you with everything, no matter how challenge seems in our lives, and internally or externally, compared to what other people have experienced. Just know that same principle applies to that. You're in control of everything, and only by you will there be any hope for us, no matter what we have to suffer before we get to it, and just enable us to get ever closer to you, and replace any motivation of fear with love for you, and just influence others to have that relationship with you that we all need. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
One thing I will say is that at VBS, one of my favorite things is that at the end, so I was leading like missions throughout the week, and at the end of each session, I would ask one of the kids to pray. Like I would just like ask for volunteers, and several hands would go up without hesitation.
Really?
And I think that's what it's like. Whenever the Bible talks about like childlike faith, it's stuff like that. Because the thing is, those kids, they're so young that they don't have to deal with like. They're not socially aware enough to feel insecure, right? For them, they're just like, oh, pray? I would love to pray. And then like you hear their prayers, and it's not performative. It's not like trying to like impress. It's literally just they're like, dear God, thank you for allowing us to come to VBS, and thank you for our leaders, and and it's like they're not even asking for anything. Like, they'll be like, help us have a good day. But it's literally just like gratitude, and it's not like these kids are like just like the most like brilliant mind. No, it's just like it's just so genuine because I don't know. Like I just like that because kids get it. they're not worried about like usually the reason we don't want to pray is we're like, oh, like we either just don't want to do it or like we're afraid what people are gonna think. Whereas like they're just like, oh, we need somebody to pray. I'll do it. And they're like, no, I want to pray. Can I pray tomorrow? I'm like, that's so good. Like I aspire for us to be like that. Not just this group, but like
Yeah.
just adults.